Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the House of Footy YouTube channel. I'm your host, Ari Stamatakos, and today, with the most recent news about Lance Buddy Franklin announcing his retirement from AFL football, we have two of House of Footy's finest contributors here to have a quick chat about him and his career. I'm joined by the resident Swans fan and second appearance here on the YouTube channel, Mr. Jakson Bertoli. Jacko, how are you? How are you in the wake of this very sad news in the footy world?
Well, you nailed it. I'm sad. It's a huge day. It's probably the one of the biggest footy stories of the year, really. I think we knew it was coming, but yeah, so I don't think quite encapsulates how I think everyone felt when it happened.
Yeah, a real sudden event that I'm sure we'll delve deep into very soon. And I'm joined with Mr. Brandon Patane, your debut here on the YouTube channel. How are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Also very sad at the news of Buddy's retirement, one of the greatest we've ever seen. But excited to be talking about his career today. So should be very good.
Yes, we could. I reckon we could be sitting here for quite a while. We'll try and keep this short because I feel like we could do a couple of podcasts on Buddy throughout his many stages of his career. But I think this probably the best place to go all the way back to maybe the start and then kind of give a holistic kind of look at his career. He burst onto the scene when he got drafted in that star-studded Hawthorn draft across those couple of years alongside Lewis and Ruffhead and the likes that carried them through in those premiership teams later down the track. But he really hit the ground running really early on in his career and took the AFL landscape by storm pretty much straight away, didn't he?
Yeah, it's a strange feeling. Obviously being born in '01, the earliest I remember of football is sort of that mid to late 2000s period there, and he's pretty much the last of those probably elite players that from my childhood that I've seen. Obviously, Pendles is still kicking about. When he's gone, that's it. And yeah, it's such a strange feeling to see one of the greatest I've ever seen go. You know, he was such an amazing player to watch. One of those who just possesses all those skills, every element he could possibly possess. He's so versatile, strong, athletic, quick, damaging with the ball. So yeah, it's really strange to see him go at this point. But yeah, I think one of the greatest I've ever seen, and plenty to talk about with him.
Yeah, for sure. I think he was definitely a footballer that has hurt a lot of fan bases in the past, and we'll touch on how much good he did and how much joy he brought Jacko soon with his Sydney career. But Brando, obviously being both of us being Carlton supporters, he's polled his most amount of Brownlow votes against any team against Carlton with 21 across his career. He had a knack of he had a knack of destroying our Blues outfit quite often, and every time we versed him, whether it was in the brown and gold of Hawthorn or in the red and white of Sydney, he would just always got a hold of us, didn't he? And you always hated him because you knew he was going to kick at least five every time he played against us. But yeah, he was one of those players, wasn't he? That just always got us.
Every single time he demolished us. Like I don't think there's a player in the competition ever that I've feared the way I feared Buddy Franklin. And there's one time we got him.
Yeah,
It was 2017 when we beat the Swans early in the season, and Alex Silvani did a job on him, and it felt like the best day of my life because of
yeah,
how bad we were that day. Getting Buddy Franklin and just, I think he kicked one maybe. Like he's that kind of player that when you shut down Buddy, it's an achievement because
yeah.
he absolutely did us in every time we played Hawthorn, every time we played Sydney. And, you know, it's just what I was used to. But, you know, like he's one of those players. You can pretend you hate Buddy Franklin. You don't. You love him. He was outstanding. He still is outstanding. And he was hitting a good patch of form the last few weeks as well. So he's still got it, but, you know, everything comes to an end and we can celebrate him now. But yeah, demolished us every time he came out.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of celebrating him, I think Jacko, you definitely would have celebrated him a lot more than us two throughout his career, especially in the latter half. What was your kind of obviously that big money move across to Sydney? How was your pure fan experience watching Lance Franklin? Because look, from an external perspective, he would have to be one of the most enjoyable and funnest footballers to kind of watch as a fan.
Watching Lance Franklin play week in and week out was like Christmas. It was like weekly Christmas when he was at the peak of his powers, which when he came to the Swans, he really was. Um, you knew exactly what you were going to get every week. It was going to be excitement. It was going to be fun. It was just going to be a great time out. And that's what he gave us for 9, 10 years, through that huge money deal when everyone, a huge money deal when everyone thought he was going to GWS. When we got the news that he was landing at the Swans, it was the celebrations we had were huge. And then to watch this man go out and do what he does and stack up his his stats stack up when you put it against Sydney to Hawthorn, and that's he didn't even play for 2 seasons at the Swans really when he had those 2 seasons out in 19 and 20. Um, it's been I felt really lucky to, and I feel Hawks fans will feel the same, like to have him on my team for such a long time. No, we didn't get the flags we wanted with him. We had 3 shots at it. So I feel like him in Buddy in Sydney was a success, and I feel like we'll dive more into that a bit later.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's one of those things where it's unfortunate that he didn't get the accolades that he did get at Sydney, because across his time, yeah, like you said, those 2 years in 19 and 20 have kind of, I wouldn't say diminished his legacy. I feel like that's very unfair, but kind of he tailed off a little bit. But when he was in his prime in that 2014, 15, 16, those years, he was electrifying to watch. And he was a man that had countless moments throughout his career, both at Hawthorn and at Sydney. Where do you want to start with his moments? Obviously, there's 2 moments, arguably 3 moments that live in football folklore just generally, but there's a couple that's maybe in that rung below that are absolutely all time. I don't know where to start, but there's a few, isn't there?
Yeah, I'm happy to take the baton there. I feel like one of the biggest is when he hit the 1,000 goals last year. Um, I was lucky enough to be there for that moment, and it's unlike any sporting experience I've felt in my life. I've been to a lot of live sport. I've been to plenty of games in Melbourne. I've been to plenty of games in Sydney. It's the most alive I've ever felt the SCG, and I think it's the most alive I've ever felt almost any football game. Um, he was obviously quiet in that first half against Geelong, round 22. He didn't kick any. I don't think he hit one or maybe none in the game against GWS round 1. And we played Western Bulldogs in round 3, so everyone was worried we were going to lose that special moment. He kicked the first in that third quarter, and you could feel the place start to build. And then when he kicked the second, and then the third in quick succession, I remember that was towards the end of the third quarter. I was sitting at the top I was sitting in the nosebleeds at the top of level 4. You could see swarms of people leaving the top decks to go down. I was stuck maybe at the top of one of the staircases at the bottom row. Everyone was stacking up to get in. Quarter time siren rang. No one moved a muscle. We all stood there in that little aisle waiting for him to come back on. We stood there through halfway through that second term, and this game was so loud with everyone so close together, but the silence that rang out when Chad Warner delivered that ball and he marked it was so eerie compared to the feeling that followed when he's kicked it and everyone floods onto the field. I don't think it's a moment I'm ever going to forget, and it's something I'm so lucky to have experienced. I don't know if we'll ever see it again. To experience something like that, I think is just one of the best moments in AFL history, and it was just so special.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's fitting for Buddy that you mentioned a moment he has 2 moments in which we don't think we'll ever see again. That is the 1,000th goal that you mentioned. And of course, we backtrack all the way to 2008 and the last man to kick 100 goals in a season. And Charlie Curno's arguably the best we've gotten. He's a long ways away from 100. Brando, what are your recollections of that game in 2008 where he kicked his 100th? And there was some other storylines surrounding that, obviously with our Blues, but I think Buddy is the main story coming out of that day. What are your recollections of that?
Yeah, there were some other storylines. We won't touch on those
No.
for too long, but obviously Buddy and Fev both had the opportunity to get their 100th goal, and Buddy was the one that did it. And funny enough, that was probably one of my earlier memories of watching football. I wasn't at the game. I watched it on telly, but me as a 6-year-old watching Buddy slot that 100th goal, and as Jacko was explaining, with 1,000, just all the fans swarming on, getting around him. That was the first time it would have happened in a little bit at that point. Just the most amazing thing. And Buddy at that point being a 22-year-old, something like that, for him to do it at that age, it was at that point that we knew that we had a special player on our hands, and he from there continued to build those moments. Obviously we'll talk about it a bit later, but the 13 goals, the goals against the Bombers, stuff like that, just moment after moment, game after game. He's one of the best we've ever seen, and no one will ever come close.
Yeah, it's definitely a kind of a player that fits both kind of moments. Like, of course, it was Buddy, who's the last player to kick 100 in a year, and probably going to be one of the last, if not the last, to kick 1,000 throughout their whole career. You mentioned those moments like the 13 and the goal against Essendon at the G, but if we're going to look at him as a player, I know you have obviously you just called him one of the greatest of all time, one of the greatest that you've seen. He was a player that really had everything. Like, I think Jordan Lewis has come out most recently, said that he's one of the best like athletes the game has ever seen, and he had the foot skills and the footy IQ to match. I don't think we're ever going to see a player like him again.
He's just so complete in everything he does. His athleticism is one thing, but to do it at 6'6", 6'7", to move as high up the field as what he did, it's incredible. He's one of the best field kicks of our generation as well when he was in his prime. He cops a lot of flack for his contested marking and his pack marks, but we've seen just this year especially, he's been exceptional at it. Like he almost got better with age to a degree, and he's almost probably the most complete footballer that I can remember, especially in recent history, just in terms of what he's been able to do on the football field.
Yeah, 100%. Like you talk about your pure key forwards, and he is that to a T, but he's also so quick. Like, you look at our current key forwards, guys like Tex Walker, Tom Hawkins, Charlie Kerner to an extent as well. They're so pure at like what their job is, and that is to be a key forward, take marks, kick goals. But Buddy was so much more than that. Like, so damaging. Like, vintage Buddy, take like specific scenarios, for example. Someone has the ball, Buddy runs at them full pelt, the ball goes away, flattens them. You don't see stuff like that anymore. Like, he's just a full pelt every time, goes at it 100%, quick, strong, damaging, athletic, a brilliant kick for goal on his best day. Like, everything. He has everything. He had everything, and he's one of the best I've ever seen, easily.
When you think of a typical Lance Franklin goal, I'm not sure what it is for you guys, but for me, it's those ones where he takes the mark, maybe 60 to 70 out, and he just turns on the left immediately and just pops it bounce into the goal square, and it floats in. Like, that is the Lance Franklin goal in my mind. Whenever I think of any goal he's kicked, it's just that quick mark on the left, empty forward line, pop it in from 70. Like, it's not a single trouble in the world. It's just, you just don't see that anymore. It's just incredible.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a hallmark of a footballer that's left a legacy. When he has a, like, when someone, even when players like, I mean, when someone like Charlie Kerner does it now, it's always, oh, that's what Buddy used to do, and that's the greatest ever exponent at that type of goal, marking him from 75 or 60, 65, 70 meters out, just wheeling straight away off a step, goal. Not even a question. And he's done that a couple of times. He's had some moments that have shown his full kind of array of skills. A couple at the G. Obviously, Cale Hooker still has nightmares. I'm sure his commission prices have gone up in this week with the amount of times that clip has been shown. But there's obviously the 13 down in Tassie, and obviously there's so many more I'm forgetting. Obviously the greatest showman call at the SCG, the hurdle in the middle of the MCG and kicking it from 150 meters out or wherever it was. That's how far out it seems. It's also quite funny how every single one of his elite and most memorable moments have coupled with elite commentary as well. It just seems like the perfect match.
Yeah, it's Anthony Hudson and Lance Franklin are a duo that will go down in footy folklore, and it sounds weird because they've never been teammates. They've never played against. One of them hasn't even been playing the sport at all. But the work they did together has created some of the most memorable moments in history, and it's my favorite commentary pairing of all time. What about you, Brando?
Yeah, like the moments that, like, obviously the 13 goals one is my favorite one. Just hearing Anthony Hudson scream into the mic, 13. And, like, any player having a moment like that is big enough as it is, but when you pair it with, such an amazing voice over the mic, it makes the moment 10 times better. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's one of those. Yeah, I keep like almost struggle to find words for just how pure and almost perfect his whole career for the most part anyway has been when it comes to these moments and when it comes to kind of his career trajectory. Speaking about his career trajectory, obviously he made that big move across in the prime of his career, going from Hawthorn, moving to what everyone thought, or from Hawthorn moving to what everyone thought would be GWS, but it was the crosstown rivalries. It was the big brother in the Sydney Swans. And Jacko, you have some thoughts about, and you have some, obviously you being living in New South Wales, a obviously well-known rugby dominated state. His influence in growing football in that state and in the city has been unmatched.
It's unbelievable, mate. Like you just said, living in New South Wales my whole life, in Newcastle and now in Sydney, there was never any support for AFL growing up. It was rugby league, it was rugby union. You just didn't see anyone play AFL. My local league, when I was in Newcastle, I had to drive the furthest I had to drive was 2 hours north, south, and inland, and that was our complete league. That was a 6 hour round trip for some people to get to play a game on a Saturday. There's just no AFL leagues. There's nothing up here. So to see the biggest player in the competition at that time, or one of, make that move to New South Wales, the impact that's had on the game in this state has just been unmatched. Like, you can talk about basic numbers. Like, every season since Lance Franklin came to the Swans, their average home attendance has been over 30,000. Like, they didn't hit 30,000 home figures, or like an average attendance until not since like their 2005 grand final wins. Like, it's just something they didn't hit. It's the leagues in Sydney, especially with GWS, he's helped grow that. The bums on seats factor, the excitement you gain around having a player like Buddy. It's why they want to bring Dustin Martin to Gold Coast or to GWS, to have a bums on seats player and just one of the all-time great talents. It needs a bigger video than this to really get into depth on what he's done for football in New South Wales, and how appreciative a lot of us fans in New South Wales are of what he's done for the sport in our state, and how he's expanded it and grown it to the levels we want it to be. There's still a long way to go, but where it is now and where he's brought it from has just been an incredible effort in the last 10 years.
Yeah, he truly is the greatest showman, and he's one of the best characters, on-field characters, that the league has seen in a long time. Obviously he's one of the, like Brandon, you mentioned earlier, he's one of the last kind of players from that era that I think a lot of us grew up in, that childhood era, and he has the elements of the likes of what Lockett had and what Gary Ablett Senior had, in terms of that you go to the footy to watch Lance Franklin kick 7 and kick goals from ridiculous angles, and just be the most exciting attraction on that day in the country. Forget about sport, just generally. Like, he had the ability to literally make everyone stop and be like, "Oh, Lance Franklin's playing. It's prime time. Let's sit down and watch." He was one of those, just one of those players that you had to watch, must watch television at nearly every single time he played, especially in his prime. And it's what made, I think you touched on the Jacket, you alluded to it. It's what made that move to Sydney all the more important, that it was a player like Lance Franklin who has that bums on seats kind of footballing style and that character, especially on the field. So yeah, he's one of very few players who can do that, no doubt.
To be coached by Horse as well, the youngest Coleman medal winner ever, like a full forward, someone who can. Lance Franklin never needed coaching, but someone who could go inside the mind and give him what he needed when he needed it. I think it's heartbreaking that this man isn't going to get the send off that he deserves. He deserves one of the biggest send offs we've ever given. Brando, mate, you were lucky enough to beat his last game. Do you want to talk us about that? The last time we'll ever see Lance Franklin on an AFL field.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I touched on before saying he's like pretty much the last of that era of elite players. You know, I always say my top 3 players that I've ever seen play are Ablett Jr., Chris Judd, and Buddy Franklin. And to be there on Saturday night, and when I heard that he'd gone off in that second quarter, it was kind of that feeling of is that it? It's such a bittersweet moment to be there, and he started really well on Saturday as well. He's been unreal, but just to be able to be there for his last couple of quarters of one of the, as I've said 100 times in this video, one of the best careers I've ever seen. It's such a strange feeling, but yeah, like he's amazing. I could sit here and talk about Buddy all day. He's one of the best I've ever seen.
If I can jump on as well, the benefits of having him in Sydney, especially when everyone thought he was going to retire last year, and then having him come around for one more. We've seen the benefits that's done this year in terms of for Logan McDonald and Joel Amadi. Like having someone like Lance Franklin there to guide and help these young kids in their careers. We've seen Logan McDonald showed size last year. Joel Amadi's been there or thereabouts, but those two have had some absolutely incredible performances this year, and they've put in some seriously impressive work, and that has to be attributed, in at least in part, to having someone like Lance Franklin and what he's been able to do for Sydney as a club in terms of the next generation of full forwards they're sending through.
Yeah, for sure. It's one of those. It's almost a weird kind of, I want to say, juxtaposition where he's had such an impact. We obviously know the impact he has on the field when he plays, right? And obviously, like you said, like you mentioned, the impact that he's obviously clearly having off the field with the improvements of the likes of Logan McDonald and Joel Amadi. They've kind of gone on leaps and bounds in the last couple of years. But despite how charismatic he was on the field, despite how much of a showman he was on the field, he was very quiet, very reserved. Media didn't really do it a whole lot. You're probably not going to be seeing him on the hosting a TV show, hosting a footy show in 5 or 6 years. He's probably going to ride off into the sunset, and it's almost fitting the way I feel like, despite how many moments he's had, obviously the 1000th goal and obviously the 100th goal and all these other moments, I feel like I wouldn't say it's almost a fitting send off for Buddy, but just a quiet, reserved, no fuss, just it's his time to go. He's riding off into the sunset.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we've really buried the lead. It'd almost be remiss not to mention some of the stuff that he's accomplished. Like 354 games for a man of his size is huge. 1,066 goals is the fourth, I believe, highest goal kicker.
Yes, let's go for.
That's just staggering. Two flags obviously for Hawthorn, 4 Coleman medalists. That's probably the most surprising of the lot of them. You would have thought he would have earned more over the journey. But 4 Coleman medalists, 8 All Australians, tied for the most in history. He's one of the most decorated players of all time, and he's going to be so sorely missed when we don't have him anymore.
Yeah, 100% Jacko. And like it speaks to the player he was for him to have that set of accolades in the modern day as well, especially the goals. Like we've mentioned before, you don't see that from key forwards these days. He was just the most dominant, probably the most dominant player I've ever seen, to be honest. Like it speaks to him as a player. It speaks to him as, like, we were talking about how he is off field before, and going back to that Sydney Essendon game that I was at on the weekend. Like, there was one point, I think, in the first quarter where we talked about how he streams away and he looks like he's going to bomb it from 60 meters on his left. And every time I see it, I crap my pants. And he just threw it on his left boot and it's laced out into Joel Amadi's chest. And, you know, like the way he plays on field, the way he operates off field, there is no one like Buddy Franklin. There never will be anyone like Buddy Franklin. And we'll continue to talk about him for the rest of our lives. We'll tell our kids about him, our grandkids about him. He's one of a kind.
Yeah, fully agree with both the points you made there. It's a fantastically or brilliantly summed up. In my opinion, he's like I said, and like Anthony Hudson has said, the greatest showman we've seen in a very, very long time. One of the best players we've ever seen. One of if not the best forwards in the modern era and of all time. He will definitely be sorely missed, and hopefully his legacy will definitely live on, both in Sydney, both at Hawthorn, and both in the wider AFL landscape. But I think that is enough for this video. Jacko and Brenda, thank you very much for joining me today, speaking about the career of Lance Franklin. To all you watching at home, thank you very much for sticking around. Make sure you leave your thoughts in the comments below. Leave your favorite Lance Franklin memory in the comments below. Try and make him a little bit, make him not quite obscure, but like obviously the 1000th goal. Yeah, all that one. The 1,000th, the 100th. There's so many moments to pick from. I'm sure you guys can get creative and original with them. But yeah, thank you very much for sticking around. Make sure to subscribe to the House of Footy YouTube channel. Make sure you head over to houseoffooty.com.au for some more footy content. And yeah, thank you very much. Subscribe, like the video. See you guys next time, and goodbye.